Good afternoon, everyone. This is Sam McGrassy with Brady Ware Dealership Advisors, and welcome to the May webinar. Today, I got joining with me today is Tom Wolf of our group and also Terry Stewart of our group. We're going to be presenting today on getting your dealership back on track. As many stores are starting to reopen. I know this webinar touches many states other than Ohio, and each state's in a different stage of this. And we thought this would be a good webinar to kick off and kind of talk about some best practices we see, some things to be thinking about as some of the stores are reopening. Some have been open during this in partial shutdowns and in a little bit different environments. So we're going to next 20-30 minutes we're going to be sharing some different best practices we see and some things we see handling the various dealerships. So with that, we're going to, the first section we're going to cover a couple four different sections: personnel and the new work environment, digital marketing and virtual sales process, managing your finances and profitability, and managing inventory during the COVID-19 era. Some of the disruptions out there in the supply chain. So with that, I'm going to jump in. I'm going to kind of kick off with personnel and new work environment. The first thing there I see, and this is something that it's kind of a soft topic, and a lot of people always blow it off, say, "Oh, we got a great culture," but it's your culture. I see when you look at dealerships and business organizations in general over the last several years, we've had a really great economy, and a lot of times culture gets masked up and everything's going right. And that's also culture is the first thing that gets exposed in times like this, and also overlooked. So it's kind of a soft topic. But it's something we see, a lot of dealers is to be intentional and spend some time focusing on their culture, their organization, especially right now we got fragmented work environments. Some folks are working inside, some are working remotely still. Some of them furloughed, some of their people, their workmates have been furloughed or laid off. It's really a good time to focus on culture, because that's really, besides the economic stuff we're going to be talking about today, the culture is one of the main things that that's going to be important to pull your dealership and store through this time. Other things kind of focus on too as well is staying flexible and being able to pivot. We don't know. I mean, you think about in early January, no one thought we're going to be in a shutdown situation, going to be dealing with the stuff we dealt with in the last 8 to 10 weeks. I think it's very important for businesses to stay flexible and then be able to pivot. And that means through liquidity, which we're talking about, but also with people-wise and bringing people back into the store and that sort of thing. It's going to be a business environment that you may have to pivot in 2 weeks. You may not have to, but the key right now is staying flexible, and that's really important. Like I mentioned earlier, as you reopen the stores, there's a lot of hybrid work environments. You have different categories of people, different people as your employees who want to come back. Some are scared of the virus still. Everyone has a different feeling on this virus, and regardless, it's a new work environment. You have to work around that and be able to know how to work remotely, securely, especially as dealerships have sensitive information and things like that. So as you still have folks, we're seeing folks still work remotely. You got to make sure that they have safeguards and some protection of information as they're working from their homes and other places. And also the communication, that's huge. And this gets back to confidentiality, communication. I mean, those are critical things we think about. You got people working remotely and stuff being transferred back and forth from the stores to different various places. As you look at your employees, some people have compromised immune systems and things like that. It's very important that you protect them and look at that. So I think you're gonna have that's why I say you really gotta have a hybrid work environment for a foreseeable future, probably, as it looks at least today. A lot of questions we see a lot about what do I bring back, or bringing employees back, especially some of the stores got these PPP loans. They're trying to gauge, my revenue has fallen, I'm not selling as many units, service is down, but I need to bring these people back, and when should I be bringing people back and bringing them on? I think one thing we all learned is don't forget the lessons we learned these last 8 to 10 weeks about working efficiently and what the new look of a new staffing model looks like, and how being efficient, and what do you really need for the store. And then with regards to bringing people back, have those fallback project lists, the CRM cleanup, the file cleanup, inventory cleanup, website updates, helping out with delivery and pickup of vehicles for contactless delivery and for both service and sales. Those are some things to be thinking about as you bring employees back on who may not be productive right away, as we're waiting for the sales volume to get back to somewhat normal. Some dealers, I see in April, they've had some decent months given there was a partial or temporary shutdown. Other dealers have significant revenue drop-offs. So to that degree, you really want to focus on trying to keep people busy and productive when they're back in the store for morale issues. And that gets back to you look at some of the stuff I already talked about regarding alignment and being alignment with your culture and alignment with your staffing model. Is you want to work towards that, and this is a fresh time to hit pause and take a look at that as the lights come back on in the stores. You're going to have, and one thing also, I get a lot of dealers calling me, they got isolated issues with people working from home, working from remote, and people actually working there. Just address the isolated issues. Don't do a shotgun approach, because all that does, again, it goes back to morale in your culture, and that's something you really want to preserve and be intentional about during this time. The new, as the store is open, you want to present a safe work environment, show that you're serious about it, regardless of what you personally think about the virus. I know all of us have different opinions. At the end of the day, we've got to provide a safe work environment for the employees and for our customers who do want to come to the store. There's going to be a certain degree of customers who are going to want to shop online and have contactless white glove service. Others are still going to be fairly comfortable coming into the store. Either way, you want to make sure when they walk in that store that they see you've taken the precautions and taken the safety seriously, the social distancing seriously. And this is some of the stuff we're seeing is even stuff small as the pens at the cashier, that there's a clean bucket and a bucket that needs sterilized pens. Taking seats out of the customer lounge, so there's spacing at the customer lounge as people are waiting in the store. The mask is a big one. A lot of stores, if the customer's in a mask, you should mask up. Have signs around regarding social distancing and markers on the floor. You really want to present both to your employees that they have and customers that they have a safe environment when they walk in your store. And that's really important. I know there's some, I was talking to some dealers, you've got local, health officials popping in the stores. I do not know, depending on where your dealership is, what authority they really have. But, you want to respect them, and if it gets too out of hand, make sure you contact legal counsel to really understand if it gets to a harassment situation, but hopefully that isn't. And they see that you're trying to provide a safe environment. Also, with your employees, you want to go through and make sure the ones who have compromised immune systems are more susceptible that you've taken that into consideration on their work schedule and how they work. Very important. Having the proper PPE around the store, the hand sanitizers, the plexiglass. Those are all good things to keep in mind as you go through each part of your store and walk through your store and kind of visualize how someone could get infected and best practices. So those are a few things I wanted to kick off. I know it's kind of a soft topic, but a lot of it's, personnel is moving around. I wanted to kind of talk a little bit about the new work environment, some things to be thinking about. Also, I didn't touch on also was, staffing. Just as going into this, you heard there's a lot of, people needed techs, for instance, or you might want to make some staffing upgrades. Again, this is the time to hit pause, look at your staffing model, maybe make some upgrades. There are people floating around with furloughed other dealerships that really want to get back to work. So use this as an opportunity to better yourself. And that's what we've been telling dealers all through the shutdown is you stay positive and use this as an opportunity to come out of this stronger and transition to even a better store. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Terry, who's going to talk a little bit about the digital marketing and virtual sales process.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. One of the things that really stuck with me there was being flexible and ready to pivot. And when you talk about the first bullet point there is your sales approach, and be prepared to do business a little bit differently than what you have done in the past. But I got to tell you, it's a great time if you look at this as an opportunity to implement some of the things in your selling process that you've never been able to do before. And a great example of that would be if you have, let's say you have an internet lead or you have a customer that calls and they're a phone up, and it's a great opportunity. A lot of best practices for a salesperson to be able to go out, take a short video, do a personalized walk around of the car, and text that to that customer. So we know that that's the best practice. We know that that helps set appointments, and you can use this environment as a great reason to get your employees on board into something that we know is very effective. And the same is true in your service department, because a lot of dealers are doing free pickup and delivery for service. And so when it comes to that multi-point vehicle inspection, can that technician do a quick walk around? Can they FaceTime the customer or do a quick video of what their brakes look like? What does their tire wear look like? All those types of things. It's just a great example of how your sales approach may change a little bit differently. And of course, everybody in every community has different regulations right now, and we're all having to adjust to those, what it seems to be like on a daily or weekly basis. So you guys are smart to figure that out. The only thing I would tell you is look at this as an opportunity to implement some of those things that we've been talking about now for the last year or so that have just had a difficult time getting your folks on board. Another thing that this can be an opportunity for is to implement a digital F&I process where you can do your presentations either online while the customer's at home or via an iPad, so you have less paperwork there in front of the customer. There's lots of different opportunities that are out there, but you just need to be flexible, ready to pivot, which is something that car dealers are really good at anyways, because every customer will be different with their comfort level with this virus, as well as every employee will be different. The next bullet point there is the update your Google My Business, Facebook, and website hours. I'll tell you this just needs to be a daily part of your audit. I have experience with a few dealers where if you Google their dealership name, it'll come up with the special hours, something like due to COVID-19, dealership is closed, even though the dealership is open. So that thing can change quite often. So it's a great idea to do an audit on that on a daily basis, just to make sure that it looks like you're open. If you are having to restrict your hours or change your hours, make sure that your website hours are up to date, which kind of goes into that next, which is revise your website marketing campaigns to make sure that your customers know that you're including pickup and delivery for both sales and for service. I think a big thing there is also to let your customers know what you are doing to keep your dealership a safe environment. Sam mentioned the PIN exchange, but you talk about, we're sanitizing your vehicle after it's been serviced. Once it's returned to you, we're sanitizing your vehicle prior to test drive and prior to delivery. Let those customers know what you're doing, because it's been a hot topic lately. That's the number one concern on a customer's mind, is knowing that when they are going into your dealership, they're going into a safe environment. And then, of course, because a lot of our customers are still working from home or just at home, period, your BDC is going to be getting a lot of increased activity. And so it's time to really refocus on that BDC, make sure that those folks are trained up. It's a great time for BDC members to gather more info from customers, because we can use that as a reason for gathering more information, more credit information, more trade-in information, all the information that we can gather prior to that customer coming into the dealership helps minimize the time that the customer is in there. And then I have a few dealers that are doing a great job doing Zoom meetings with customers, and have sold a few cars doing Zoom meetings. I know all of us are probably tired of Zoom meetings, but the customers are pretty responsive to that, and they like the way that sales process works. It's cheap, easy, and free. Your manufacturer's incentives and all the offers that are happening seem to be changing quite often, and they're fantastic right now. And so just make sure that your BDC representatives, all your salespeople, know exactly what the programs are, because what we're seeing is that buyers are buyers right now are buying typically for a couple of reasons. Some people are trying to take advantage of the opportunities, the great deals that are out there because of the pandemic. And so they feel like it's a great time to take advantage of the incentives. And some buyers, sadly, are buying because they need to, whether they need to maybe lower their monthly payment or get rid of a monthly payment. And so that one bullet point there that says, what are your customers' needs? It's a great time to talk to your staff about refocusing on the customer, having that qualifying conversation with them, figuring out what they're trying to evaluate or what they're trying to accomplish. That bullet point says evaluate your marketing budget, vendor discounts. It's a great time to get a great deal, right? Because advertising is taking a hit right now. There's a lot of major national advertisers that are pulling out. So now's the time to get a good deal. Just like customers buying cars from you, the vendors for marketing are in the exact same situation. So it's a great idea to evaluate what your marketing budget is, where are you spending it, where are you spending your money, trim the fat out of where you can trim the fat out, and look to either renegotiate the prices or the terms of your contracts. The sourcing lower priced used cars, we're getting some feedback that says customers are looking to purchase used vehicles because they're trying to avoid public transportation. And this used vehicle market, as we'll touch on later in the inventory section, is going to be hot and heavy. As we all know, we're going to be running out of new cars here until the factories can catch up. And so now it's a great time to refocus on your used car inventory, because you are going to have some buyers that maybe didn't have cars before that want the safety of having their own transportation. And then sort of what we talked about before, consider advertising in new outlets. You may have some employees that have a little bit of downtime. There are lots of free things like Facebook Marketplace, Craigslist. There's 10 million of those types of things that we can get our inventory out there. And those folks that have some idle time, it's a great avenue for them to focus their energies on. So that's being flexible, ready to pivot, be open to any ideas. Kind of the point of this process of going through this virtual sales process, digital marketing, really a lot bigger focus on that during this pandemic than what we've had in the past. So I'm going to turn it over to Tom. Tom's going to talk about managing your finances and profitability and ways to help dealers save some money during this time.
Thank you, Terry. So yeah, this is going to be the financial aspect, and obviously we've all been living these last 8 weeks or so, and really starting to focus on the cash needs of the business. Obviously, we've gotten PPP loans for a lot of dealerships out there, and so that's going to help in the short term. But if that 8-week term does not get extended, cash flow is going to continue to be important as we move on to the summer and the fall months. And so if you haven't already, now's the time to really focus on cash and building up those cash reserves to where, you know, even tougher times may be coming as inventory levels run low. So I just want to focus on cash, just with some ideas, some things we've seen, and try to generate some dialogue here. So cash is king. I mean, at the end of the day, it ain't profit till it's cash. And so we've had some great times over the last few years. Dealerships have been booming, making a lot of profits. And so a lot of times bad habits are developed during good times. Now we've got a bad time. This is where we need to hone in and focus on our good habits and really fine tune cash and make sure we're optimizing as much as we can. So just to go through some good ideas here, heat sheets. I know people maybe got away from this in the past few years as cash was pretty prevalent in the dealerships and it wasn't as much of a priority. But managing this on a daily basis, looking at the doc report, understanding where the holdups may be in your contracts in transit is something you definitely want to focus on. E-contracting in F&I can help with that whole process and speeding up the collections. Now's a time where obviously sales aren't probably where we want them to be. They're anywhere from 50% off to more than what they were in prior months before the pandemic. And so really deals coming up from F&I, there's really no excuse for those deals not to be complete or to be missing information that's going to hold up on the collection. So now's a time where we have good communication between accounting and F&I to make sure those deals are coming up clean so we can turn around and get those monies collected as soon as possible and get that into cash. So that's really got to be a focus there, and having good working relationship between F&I and accounting. In terms of other receivables, is there a way to reach out to maybe some of your partners at body shops and such, where you might have a way to negotiate and maybe offer a small discount to collect receivables quickly, so that, I'm going to talk about prioritizing payables in a few minutes, but people are going to start to slow down their payables. So how do we manage that to try to be the first in line for our customers, to pay? So that's going to be something you might want to take a look at in terms of, again, offering some small discounts in order to speed up collections and enhance that cash flow. Like I mentioned before, prioritizing payables, like what are the important vendors that we know we have to pay on a regular basis to keep things moving in the right direction, kind of prioritize, those payment terms, negotiate payment terms if at all possible with vendors, and maybe there's some discounts or things that you can go the other way as well. So an obvious one here is floor planning the used cars. Hopefully you've got some equity in used cars. You have that ability to floor plan those cars, and if you can work out some agreements with the banks, even as those floor plan used cars become a little bit more aged, maybe you can negotiate some deferred interest payments as well as deferred curtailments as well. We've seen that a lot with banks and them being willing to do that. So that's obviously something to consider and look into. Another thing is, accessible lines of credit. Are there lines of credit? I've had a few dealers that have been drawing on their lines of credit just to make sure they have those cash reserve. If something changes quickly, like Sam mentioned, this is a time to be able to be flexible and being able to pivot depending on how things, go over the next few weeks, few months, or even into the next year. One other thing to take a look at, the factory open account. Probably not too much here, but just you want to make sure you're reviewing that. It's not something you write a check for every month, so maybe it doesn't always get looked at, but making sure that you are getting benefit out of the purchases that you have on the factory open account, and look for any unnecessary charges that you can kind of take out of there. If you've got any big capital projects planned, you've probably thought of this already. What can I delay? What is truly necessary to, again, keep those cash reserves on hand and maybe delay those projects and large purchases until times are a little bit more certain. A lot of times we help our clients do weekly cash plans or as much as like a 13-week cash flow projection to say, okay, here's what I anticipate now, here are my assumptions. If those assumptions change quickly, you can adapt and you can update those assumptions in your 13-week cash flow projection. So that's something, a good tool you can use on a weekly basis, and then going out a little bit further to the next quarter. Looking at your controllable expenses, we talked a little bit about payroll earlier. You want to focus on only vital spending, reducing things like advertising is a common one, but also some other things that maybe trickle in as well: travel, entertainment, any training that employees might be doing, new purchases of loaner vehicles, depending on what your factory program is and what your requirements may be. Make sure you're not expending more than you need to there. I mentioned working with your banking partners on deferments and curtailments. Are there opportunities to defer your insurance payments as well on some of your equipment that you might not be using as much, especially vehicles for the dealership, if that's something that the insurance carrier might be able to reduce? And really, like Sam mentioned, it's right sizing your head count and given your current business volume. It's not where we want it to be right now, so let's make sure we've got the right employees in, that we're redistributing work where we can, and we've got the vital employees, and the non-essential employees have been either laid off or furloughed at this time until we can bring them back on. One other thing I did want to mention is possibly reviewing excess cash flow that might be available from reinsurance companies. Those are very common, at least on the F&I side for dealerships. Is there an opportunity to loan some of those funds from the reinsurance company back into the dealership to help with short-term cash flow needs? So just some ideas there to be thinking about on how to shore up the cash reserves. And then I will turn it over to Terry to talk about one other piece of balance sheet management, and that's inventory management during this time.
Yeah, thank you, Tom. And, of course, the inventory management is something that never goes away, but gets even more critical in tighter times. And we have a very unique situation right now where our factories are closed, and even once they do open, are going to be ramping up very, very slowly. And so you're going to have a limited new car supply, which is which is no news to anyone. I'm just going to advise you just to be smart on the deals that you're taking. Take your trade-ins right, but also understand that to look at those deals, make sure your sales managers are looking at those deals in the totality of the deal. In other words, is there a great opportunity to make money in F&I? Is it a trade-in that we know we're going to be able to sell, or is it a piece that we may only sell 2 or 3 a year of? And so just try to take that into account. I know it's always a balance between a bird in the hand, and we also want to earn as many customers as we possibly can. So it's a tough balance that we play in that arena when we're sitting on the desk. But all of you know how to do that. But just look at the deal in the totality of it. What's the trade-in going to look like? What's my opportunity in the F&I department going to look like? And try to make the best decision from there. We have some auctions that are closing because of this, and so I'm going to tell you that's not happening everywhere in the country. So there are areas where they are open. Of course, almost everywhere that I know of now is simulcast only, which is a great opportunity to get people trained. If we still have some guys that are dead set on going to the auction every week, then this is a great opportunity to get them trained on how to do simulcast, explore the shipping options. Doesn't matter where they're at in the country. Get those used cars in there because it's tough to sell from an empty shelf. We know that with the factories closing, the rental vehicles are what's happening is they're staying in service, because when the factories get ramped up, they're going to try to flip their fleet production over into cars that can get shipped to dealers. So you're going to probably see a few less rental cars at the auction because of that factory shutdown, but there's still tons and tons of opportunity there at those sales. Find the ones that are open, no matter where they're at in the country. Get yourself a shipping company and get some of those cars in there. It's going to go down into that creating a strong used vehicle department. Now's the time to refocus and make sure that those cars are your cars, they're your money sitting there, and make sure that you know what they look like, right? So also don't be afraid to take in good trades, take in the trades that need some reconditioning on them. If you're looking at cars at the auction that need a little bit of body work, or that they're going to need a lot of love put on them before you can get them on the lot, don't be afraid to buy those cars. A lot of dealers have turned those away in the past, but those cars are really good for those of you that have body shops. Those cars are really good for your service department as well. So cars that need reconditioning are things that kind of help keep the wheels turning. And then you may have some dealers out there, as these curtailments start, a lot of the floor plan providers have had curtailments that they've deferred. And as those deferments start to end up, you're going to have several dealers out there who need to turn this inventory. And so don't be afraid to reach out to your fellow dealers, people who need cash, people who need to turn inventory. There may be some opportunities for you to pick up some good units from that standpoint. And again, going back to creating that strong used vehicle department, creating a new value story for your used vehicles. We have dealers that are starting to offer 2 years of free oil changes, or a 6-month or 2-year long warranty, or a lifetime warranty even, or whatever it happens to be, tires for life, whatever it ends up being. What is your value story? What are your why buys? Why should somebody buy a used car from you instead of a used car from the dealer down the street, whether it be independent or franchised? So know what your why buys are, and make sure that your salespeople know what they are too. Make sure your BDC knows what they are. Sam mentioned the word alignment earlier, and so just get everybody aligned on that value story so that you're all singing from the same song sheet. Refresh your existing inventory. Just because your dealership's been closed and nobody's been able to sell doesn't mean that inventory is still as fresh as it was the last time it was parked there. As we all know, they all need driven to make sure they drive out good, make sure that they're fresh and they're clean and they smell good, all those types of things. Get the sales managers, get your salespeople out in that inventory, make sure they're fresh, make sure they're sellable, make sure they're ready to go. And then the other thing that we're seeing is this all lease vehicles, whether, these vehicles were leased 3 years ago, 39 months ago, well before the pandemic, and they're still coming off lease. So there's still a lot of opportunity there to pick up some of off the lease. But you know, this is nothing new for a lot of dealers. We've all been through tough times before, and one of the things that makes the dealer body so strong is being able to react and react quickly to the market. We wish you the best of luck from that standpoint. So you know, to close this out.
Thank you, Terry and Tom. There's really a lot of good, useful information. I think I want to thank everyone for tuning in this month. I know we threw a lot of information out there at a very high level, but again, we want to kind of keep these things short and sweet. And if we got our email and contact information up there. If you have any questions, you know, please email us, and we'll do our best to get some answer back or some more, so you have some answers back or some more information that you may need. So I appreciate everyone joining in. Hope everyone hangs in there and stays safe and healthy, and get your stores back to where they should be. And turn this year around and finish this year off strong. So talk to everyone next month. Take care.